Breaking tonight, after nearly a decade of broken promises and mounting security concerns, Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is once again vowing to take back the country's most strategically important northern harbour from Chinese hands. But this time, something's different. Dear viewers, the story of Darwin Port represents one of the most controversial foreign investment decisions in Australian history, a decision that has haunted Canberra's national security establishment for nearly 10 years. Tonight, we're examining whether Australia will finally reverse what many consider a strategic catastrophe, or whether Beijing's economic leverage will once again force Canberra to back down. The deal that changed everything. Let's rewind to 2015. The semi-autonomous Northern Territory government, facing severe financial strain, made a decision that would send shockwaves through Australia's defence community. They leased the Port of Darwin, the country's northernmost major harbour, to Landbridge Group, a privately owned Chinese company, for 99 years. The backlash was immediate and fierce. At least one poll showed up to 90% of Australians surveyed, believing the deal carried either some risk or a lot of risk to national security, and they had good reason to be concerned. Darwin Port isn't just any commercial facility. Sitting at Australia's northern tip, it's geographically closer to the capitals of 5 foreign nations than to Canberra itself. A significant portion of commodities destined for Asian markets flows through this northern gateway. But here's what makes this truly alarming. The port sits in the same vicinity as U.S. Marine Rotation Force Darwin, where roughly 2,000 U.S. Marines train seasonally alongside Australian forces. Translation: a Chinese-operated port controlling access to facilities where American and Australian forces conduct joint military training. The espionage opportunities alone are staggering, to say nothing of the potential for selective denial of access or interference with logistics in a conflict scenario. The promise that never came. Fast forward to April 2025. On the campaign trail, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese made Australians a bold promise he planned on getting the port back into Australian hands. Sound familiar? It should, because this wasn't the first time Australians heard this pledge. In 2022, the Albanese administration authorized an official investigation of port activities and investments. Momentum was building, reviews were underway, and then nothing. Ahead of plans to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2023, the momentum slowly fizzled out. Australia-China relations warmed. Diplomatic efforts refocused on preserving stability in the relationship. The official report from the government review was remarkably muted. It found no reason to cancel the lease. The port remained in Chinese hands. The wake-up call, but then something happened that forced a sobering reckoning in Canberra. In February 2025, a flotilla of Chinese warships entered the Tasman Sea off Australia's southeastern coast and commenced unannounced live-fire exercises. They provided only brief notice to a nearby civilian aircraft. Australian officials, caught completely off guard, scrambled to meet with their Chinese counterparts within hours to demand answers. The incident underscored 2 terrifying realities. First, Beijing can effectively project hard power into distant regions well beyond China's traditional spheres of operation. Second, and more alarmingly, it can do so without being detected by Australian forces. Translation: if Chinese warships can conduct surprise military exercises in Australian waters without detection, what does that say about Australia's ability to monitor activities at a Chinese-operated port on its own soil? The worry that China may make good on its military threats, or at minimum engage in sporadic military harassment, catalyzed immediate action. Shortly after the Tasman Sea exercises, Albanese met with New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon to discuss stronger military integration and signed a $6.5 billion contract with Japan for 11 new frigates for the Royal Australian Navy. Security concerns over Darwin Port suddenly became far more tangible. New tools, new possibilities. Here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Following reforms to foreign investment policies in 2024 and 2021, Canberra now possesses stronger legal mechanisms to reverse problematic foreign transactions. Under the new framework, the Treasurer may initiate risk-based assessments of critical infrastructure, and if deemed contrary to national security interests, may compel a reversal of a transaction. This resolves a long-standing legal hurdle. At the time of the 2015 sale, then Prime Minister Scott Morrison argued that the federal government lacked jurisdiction to review or alter the deal. There was also an understanding that once a sale was approved, retrospective changes were strictly prohibited. The latest reforms addressed both concerns. The national security test was expanded to encompass decisions made by the Northern Territory government. And perhaps more importantly, the reforms enabled the disposal of an interest that has been acquired, allowing the government to reverse past contracts. Translation: for the first time, Canberra has the legal authority to actually take back Darwin Port. Beijing's red line China's response has been predictable and forceful. Beijing has drawn a clear red line, warning that it would be obliged to take measures to protect Chinese interests if the port is taken back. The Chinese embassy argues this is not a way to do business, claiming Australia leased the port during financial strain, but now seeks to reclaim it after conditions improved. It's a narrative designed to raise serious worry among prospective foreign investors. But Canberra can address this skepticism by making clear that Darwin Port remains unique its strategic location, proximity to sensitive military facilities, and role as a major trade gateway set it apart from standard commercial transactions. The financial wild card, but here's the twist that could change everything. In late 2024, Landbridge Group was reportedly scrambling to offload assets and pay down debt to stave off creditors and avoid a forced sale of Darwin Port. As of 2021, Landbridge had been sued at least 14 times by major financial creditors. In public statements, the company has warned that an insolvency event could occur, which would trigger formal bankruptcy proceedings. Translation: the Chinese company controlling Australia's most strategic port might go bankrupt, leaving ownership in complete limbo. This mounting financial pressure may push Landbridge Group to divest voluntarily. The company has engaged in discussions with the government for the past 6 months, with Canberra signaling optimism that a private buyer could step forward with a credible offer. Landbridge's receptiveness to engage has given the Albanese administration greater confidence that reclaiming the facility remains possible. The balance shifts if Canberra moves to reclaim Darwin Port. It could face economic retaliation from Beijing. That's the same calculation that has paralyzed previous efforts. But unlike those previous instances, the balance of risks is shifting. Legal authorities are clearer. Landbridge is in a financially weaker position. China's military behavior has sharpened Australia's threat perceptions. Public support for reclamation remains overwhelming. The strategic environment is increasingly conducive to reclamation. The question is whether Albanese has the courage to follow through this time, or whether this will be yet another broken promise, another capitulation to Beijing's economic pressure. What this means, dear viewers, the Darwin Port saga is about more than a harbor. It's about whether Australia can defend its sovereignty when economic interests and national security collide. It's about whether a middle power can stand firm against a great power's economic coercion. For nearly a decade, Australia has lived with a strategic vulnerability it never should have accepted. Chinese control over Darwin Port has given Beijing a foothold in Australia's most strategically sensitive region, a position that could prove catastrophic in a conflict scenario. Now, for the first time, the stars may be aligning for Australia to reverse this decision. New legal tools, financial pressure on Landbridge, and China's increasingly aggressive military posture have created a window of opportunity. The question is whether Canberra will seize it or let it close once again. What do you think? Will Australia finally reclaim Darwin Port, or will economic pressure from Beijing force another retreat? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more analysis of the forces reshaping the Indo-Pacific region.